Father, we thank you for this day, this opportunity to come together and fellowship and to learn. Be with our speaker today and also with those that need your healing. On this Memorial Day weekend, we honor those who paid the ultimate price so that we could live free. May we appreciate what that means for each of us. We pray for peace in our troubled world and in our troubled country. We thank you for the many blessings you've given us, and we ask your continued blessing. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Betsy, you want to come up and talk to us about the directory?
There was a notice in the newsletter this week that we're trying to work on printing out a Challenger directory. In order to do that, we need everyone to give permission. And most of you have already given permission for your information to be in the church directory part. But there's a group now called Challengers. And I will help you anytime. I'll leave this up here, and I've got handouts here. But what you do is once you go into, you click on up here at the very top where your name is, and then you go down and you'll find groups. And most everyone is already entered into the Challenger group. You click on that, and all you have to do is just click those 4 check marks if you want your information in the directory. And we're just trying to do it right. So anyway, we'll be working on this. Yes, you can. You can edit your own information. You can change your picture. The place you would edit most of your information would be on the first page, not on the Challengers area. But you could go into to that. Jim? Yes, I do. Okay.
Okay, we'll try to get everybody in that directory. So. Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate our speaker, Olivia, coming today. And to introduce her, I'm going to call Mike. Come on up.
Okay. I won't say too much, except that this is the most amazing leader I've ever worked with. She and I met about 4 years ago at Collegiate Hall Charter School, which is 45th in Peoria. Yeah. It's a battle zone that I doubt any of you, if you have been there, wanted to be. And she carried that school and all of us on her back through unbelievable situations like COVID shut us down. Think about what that meant. Now, you know what it means to businesses, charitable organizations, the works. But a school has got to communicate with the students. That's your puzzle for this morning, and that's enough. Olivia Martin, wonderful.
Well, good. Oh, that's on. Okay. Good morning. Thank you for having me today. If you ever want a friend who will always say nice things about you, make friends with Mike Burton. I don't think it's out of turn for me to say. I think when Mike and I first met, you may not remember this, but we had a little. It wasn't a full-on fight, but there was a little conversation in my office about equity, and I was like, "Oh no, we're going to have a hard time, this gentleman and me," and that never happened. We became great friends. He's an incredible listener and a supporter of anything that is good for students, and it's been my privilege to call him my friend since then. I'm going to start an example of our curriculum around, and just so people can look at it. It's just one example of many of the lessons that we offer at Reading Partners, but I want everybody to kind of be able to see it and hold it as I talk about our program. You can take things out of there if you want to, but I'm just so grateful to be able to be with you all this morning, and I have so many friends and loved ones who go to church here, so that's even better. Okay, I'm going to start with the bad news about literacy. You may know this already, but only about 30%, fewer than 30% of students in Oklahoma are really proficient readers when they go into 4th grade. Think about that. And that's true across urban districts, rural districts, but Tulsa is especially hard hit. The urban areas have different challenges than the rural areas, but that was not the truth when I was growing up. It wasn't the truth when you were growing up, that reading was such a challenging thing for students to achieve. And if you were a teacher in elementary school, you would know that when you are learning to read, all of the ins and outs of learning to read, those really happen between birth and 3rd grade. So if you are not a strong reader when you enter 4th grade, you're set up to have a really big challenge. We learn to read through 3rd grade, and we read to learn after that. So if I need to study science, I need to study history, even math. If I'm not a strong reader, that's going to impact my ability to succeed in all of those areas. And if I'm not a strong reader, I'm not as inspired to be at school, and I'm not as inspired to graduate from high school and attend secondary education. All those things are dismantled for me, for many students, if I'm not a good reader in 4th grade. So that is what Reading Partners is striving to do, is to make sure that every student in our region is able to read by the time they reach 4th grade. And you can imagine that's a big challenge. Let me tell you a little bit more about our context. And some of you, I'll try not to be political at all. We are all still overcoming the challenges of COVID. Now, we're seeing some really good shifts this year in our data for students, so we feel like we're kind of pulling out of the post-COVID education challenges. That's still going to take some time, but our data in Tulsa for the 888 students we served this year in Tulsa Public and Union Schools, of those 888, 94% of those students reached their end-of-year goal for their literacy growth. We haven't seen those kind of stats since COVID, so we know we're making progress in that way. That's incredible. Now, we want it to be 100%, and we want it to be a lot more than 888 students, and I'll tell you how you can help us with that in a little bit. Part of the reason why Mike and I have been good friends is because we share collegiate hall experience and hall and hall experience in our lives. I taught for many years at Hall and Hall, and I was the admission director and financial aid director there. And my daughter, who's going to be a senior next year, has been there since she was 3 years old. So I have seen and been in a space that needs for nothing and has every opportunity for students. Your children had the same experience, and we know that there's not equity across every school. So the experience that I got to offer students as a teacher there and the experience my daughter has had is very different than the students we were serving at Collegiate Hall and other schools in our region, especially our under-resourced public schools. One of my goals in coming into public education was to do more to close that gap, to give more students opportunities and access like students had at Hall and Hall. They maybe didn't know those things were available to them, or they hadn't had a person championing that, so that was a real inspiration for me. But one of the things that Reading Partners really cares about is educational equity, making sure that every student has what they need to be successful and reach their potential. And I've been on both sides of that, and I know how much of a challenge it is for some of our schools that just don't have certified teachers. They can't hire people, or they don't have the money to pay for resources, or they have serious attendance challenges. That's a real problem in TPS right now. many of our students are only attending about 30% of the time. So if you're only at school 30% of the time, it's very, very hard to make progress in that school year. TPS is working really hard around that, and we are working with Impact Tulsa to try to create incentives around attendance and celebrate attendance and encourage attendance. But you know, if you're in second grade, you don't drive yourself to school. So all the ways that we can lean into that work and encourage attendance and help people understand the value of being in school every day. But we're making up ground because, well, they didn't have to be in school during COVID. So isn't it okay? Like, we're just having to reframe all of those things. They did need to be in school, and we still provided education for them, but attendance is so important. And so we're part of the effort to incentivize attendance and encourage attendance as well. You know, we live in a state that doesn't always give all of the taxpayer resources to public ed that it could. So that's a challenge we're always trying to overcome, to make sure we have engaged donors, engaged volunteers, people advocating for our work. And so I'm going to give you some ideas at the end of the presentation about how you can support the work and get involved. But we do live in a state that has challenges supporting the needs of our public school students. So just reminding you of that. And then if you've paid attention to the news at all, and Deborah Gist goes to church here, right? TPS was under terrible assault from the state. And are there things in TPS that need fixing? Absolutely. Were they Deborah's fault? No. But it's a big urban system with a lot of poverty and lack of engagement and things like that. So they're overcoming a lot of things, but it doesn't help teachers to want to stay in schools. It doesn't help students to get excited about being in school if you're just hearing bad things about school all the time in the news. And so it's really important for us to be a champion of students and a champion of teachers in the work that we do too, because they've really had a hard run for a long time, but especially over the last few years. And I'll say all day long that Deborah did the absolute best thing that she could. I mean, she did the best thing she could every day for students. The last thing that's impacting literacy is curricular changes over the last 20 years. So when I went to school, I assume probably when you went to school, you learned the sounds of letters, you learned to sound out words. Does everybody remember sounding out words? There was about a 15-year time when Lucy Calkins was a big hit in education. She's not entirely wrong, but like so many things, we went from one extreme of teaching something all the way over to the other. Like this was going to be the solution. This was the hip new way to teach students to read. And some students it really did help, but it's called whole or balanced language reading. And so it had a lot of guessing built into it. It had a lot of look at the picture to try to determine what the word is. Now that's not a terrible strategy when you're learning to read. And a lot of those strategies we all used anyway, we just didn't have a frame for them, but we kind of forgot about teaching students to sound out words. And that didn't work. For every child. Now some children are natural readers, but that's a very small percentage. Almost everyone needs explicit instruction in reading. You don't just wake up one morning and know how to read. You have to be told what the letters sound like and how they sound when they're together. So we're also recovering from that swing back to the middle so that we have more science of reading, which is how we probably all learn to read, along with the things that we learned that were great to support readers in that other curricular innovation. Speaking of educational equity though, my daughter had that same instruction at Hall and Hall because everyone was doing that whole and balanced read. It wasn't unique to public schools. But when you go to Hall and Hall and your mom teaches English, or your Hall and Hall child who can afford tutoring, or you have a huge library in your house, that learning was different for Hall and Hall kids than it was for a lot of our public school students. So Maddie was I was concerned about her reading. So I said, why is she not reading? And she got it, but she had all these other resources that a lot of our students just don't have, so they didn't get to catch up in the same way that a student in a more privileged environment did. So that's all of the context of how we get here today. And that's a lot. And you think, oh gosh, that's too much to fix. And it is a lot to fix. But my goal is to work myself and my team out of a job. Our goal is to close Reading Partners at some point because no students need us anymore. So I know that we can do that. And with all the help of the community, we can. A little bit of history on Reading Partners. It started in Oakland, California 25 years ago with two moms who wanted to help students learn to read better. And they recruited community volunteers to come into the school, and they trained them on helping students learn to read. And it expanded into a national organization. There are 12 regions of Reading Partners in the country, and Tulsa is one of them. And we are celebrating the end of our 11th school year in Tulsa. We have served 11,000 plus students in those years, and we have served 358,000 tutoring sessions in that time. And that's community volunteers doing the tutoring. So that has been a great impact in our community, but we know we could do so much more. We just need everyone to partner with us in any way that they can to help make a difference for students. Currently in TPS, there are about 6,000 students who would really benefit from literacy support. And we served 888 working really hard. So you can imagine how much more we could do when we have that many students who would benefit from literacy interventions. I was telling Mike, it's fun to be part of a national organization because you get different supports, and there are also things that I want to say, listen, this is Tulsa, Oklahoma. We do things better here, which we do. So Tulsa is second only to New York City in the number of students we serve. And we are the smallest city of the 12. So we're in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Denver, Twin Cities, San Francisco, LA. And we're only a little bit behind New York City in how many students we serve every year. And so that's a testament to Tulsa and all the ways that we care about students and supporting each other and donating to good causes and all those things. So I just always have that, there's a competitive part of me that always wants to say, Tulsa's better, because it is, but Tulsa Reading Partners is especially good just because of the engagement with our community and the people who care and they want to give of their time, talent, and treasure to help kids read. And we're going to catch New York City, so you can help me do that. This last year, those 888 students were tutored by 1,060 community volunteers. Our goal was 1,250 this year. We got pretty close, but we're going to set a goal of 1,250 next year as well and try to serve 1,000 students in the next school year. If we could do more than that, that would be fantastic, but those are our goals. I'll tell you a little bit more about the tutoring in a minute, but it's just more evidence of why Tulsa Reading Partners and Tulsa as a city do such great things together. We also have a lot of intentional partnership with TPS and unions. So in years past, Reading Partners kind of just came into your school, set up a reading center, brought in volunteers, delivered the curriculum, and left, which was okay. But we are being much more engaged now, especially given what TPS has been through, to partner directly with teachers and principals and parents to say, is this working for your child? Is this helping your class progress? Really leaning into how we can help all Tulsa students do better, even if not every Tulsa student is in Reading Partners. Because we only tutor kindergarten through fourth grade students, which is our target of where we're trying to make the most difference. But we are intentionally talking to principals. We're sharing our data. We don't want our 94%, yay, we got there, to not have an impact on MAP scores and OSTP scores and things that make TPS better. It doesn't really matter if our scores are good if they don't reflect across in ways that help Dr. Johnson and our teachers and our students to do better. So we're very much into that partnership right now, and we have all kinds of other partners. So you may be in organizations right now that would be good partners for Reading Partners. We partner with CAP Tulsa and help their preschoolers. We share books with them. We partner with Educare. We partner with My Brother's Keeper. I don't know if you're familiar with My Brother's Keeper, but it's an incredible organization. I can answer those questions later. But we're really trying to do everything we possibly can to get books in the hands of students, to engage people in the literacy crisis. We have, right now with My Brother's Keeper, we just opened 2 little libraries in 2 North Tulsa barbershops. Because kids were sitting, lots of, especially My Brother's Keeper invests in young men and boys of color. So the data on like black boys, if it's kind of 30% for everybody, black boys in Tulsa are at 9% proficient. So, and Hispanic boys are at 14%. So we need to really target that work. So we got together and said, well, people love to hang out at the barbershop. And the barber has a lot of cachet and sway in the community, and so now there are books there for every student to read while they're waiting. They get discounts on haircuts. They get stickers when they read so much. We're going to do drawings for bikes and televisions and all, based on how much you read when you were at the barber shop. We're going to do that all year. So there are all different ways that people can get involved with literacy that may not even have anything to do with Reading Partners. And like I said, I don't care if we're Reading Partners. We can shut ourselves down. I want students to be able to read. However, we need to get there. So that's a fun thing that we're doing right now. We hope that pays off really well. Okay, how tutoring works at Reading Partners. So the little packet is going around and everyone's able to look at it. There are 4 levels of curriculum. So when students come into our program, we assess them with a STAR assessment, which is an assessment that Union Public Schools use all the time. It's not unique. And just see where they are. Like if I'm a first grader, but I'm testing at kindergarten 3rd month, that's kind of how you're getting where they should be, then we start you at that level of curriculum. You may be further ahead than that. You may be in 4th grade and you can be in the advanced curriculum, but wherever you test, that's where we start with your packet. And you are matched with a tutor. You go to tutoring 45 minutes twice each week. You're pulled out of class. A lot of our tutors do 1 session a week. They don't do both. Some people do both. Or some people tutor a whole morning. We have a lot of retired friends who they love to do it and they'll spend a Thursday morning with us. But the curriculum is completely scripted. So you do not have to have taught before. You do not have to have engaged with little kids before. Everything is set up for you. You have an AmeriCorps member in the room. So if you have a problem or you need to be coached a little bit, they're listening, they're helping, they're walking around. If your child goes under the table and they're not coming back up again, which sometimes happens, you might be able to coax them out, but you also might need your AmeriCorps member to come and help you. So they're there to walk around. Both of my parents tutor at John Hope Franklin in North Tulsa, and my poor dad, he is so intentional and careful and doesn't want to make any mistakes. And sometimes he's been with a child who's very like him, and sometimes he's been with a child that is not. And he's like, I'm messing this up. You can't mess it up. You are mentoring a child and caring about them. You're with them one-on-one, and you are reading a script. You do not have to have expertise. You do have some training and onboarding, but it's the easiest way to help kids to grow because I am just reading the blue words until I get comfortable. Now, I'm a teacher, so I make stuff up all the time when I'm in tutoring, but because I'm like, oh, they know this, I'm going to try this. But if you haven't had that experience, it is all laid out for you. What book to read, what questions to answer. There are little stickers that say, ask this question now when you're reading through the book. So it's very, very easy. And every lesson is the same. The student comes in and picks a book for you to read to them, because we know reading aloud to students is so effective for their vocabulary and their learning of letters and those things. You read to them for about 10 minutes, and then you do a little lesson. It might be, these are all words that start with A. What does A sound like if you're working with kindergartners? Or it could be a more comprehension or vocabulary focused lesson at the older ages or further along in the curriculum. That's about 15 minutes. You have a whiteboard and they're writing and you're making, this is what BL sounds like at the beginning of words. And then the book that they read to you at the end is all about what you studied together. So if I studied BL blends at the beginning of a word, I'll have lots of BL blends at the beginning of a word in the story. So they get to practice that and hear it and see it over and over again. So everything is very intentional and scientifically designed to move them on in their growth as a reader. Tutoring is very easy. It intimidates some people, but it's the easiest thing. And Dad is still doing it. He hasn't given up yet. So he's in love with his little guy who he helps. Okay, we're making progress. Oh, I know you. Is Tammy here? No. Okay, so I heard through the grapevine that Tammy is instrumental in helping people people volunteer at McClure. Oh. You're, okay, help with McClure? Okay. Thank you, Tammy, for doing that. But we went back into McClure this school year. We had not been at McClure because a principal has to want you to be there, and a school has to we have a fee for service that schools have to have in their budget to help. Now, they never do, and we raise money around it. But the goal is for the school to pay a vendor cost to us of $21,000 per school because it's cheaper than hiring a teacher and benefits, and they're getting all of that. That's not, in Oklahoma, that's not always possible. Sometimes they have 0, sometimes they have 3,000. But McClure, for whatever reason, had kind of fallen out of our portfolio. But last year we were back in McClure, and we're going to be there again. Tammy, you may know this. Other people may know this too. They're going to have a new principal at McClure next year. Dr. Rhonda Kessler has been at Kendall Whittier for years, and because she's done such incredible work at Kendall Whittier, she's moving over to McClure to really make an impact there. And since that school is close to you, there's so many ways that this whole community can support McClure. We're working with Metro Christian to help them connect more with McClure and volunteer there. You could be part of that. And it's not just Reading Partners, it's things you're already doing, gathering food for students, helping them take attendance, welcoming them in the morning. But McClure needs a lot of our attention and love, and we're there, and we're one way that you as a person or a class or a church could really pour into your community school. And that's something else we're trying to do, is to think about what businesses, houses of worship, individuals are near our school sites. We were in 24 schools this year. We'll be in 26 next year. And so we really want to build little investment hubs around each one of those schools. So maybe you go to church here, but you live in another part of town. There is a school near you. There's a school near your work. There's a school near where you go to lunch once a week where you could be engaged. But McClure, its proximity and your connection to McClure already is a natural fit for anything that you might want to partner with us to do at McClure. T.D. Williamson also loves McClure, and they invest in McClure. And so we're really trying to get donors, individuals, organizations pouring into McClure to help them with everything they need, especially with the new principal. She's going to have a lot. And thank you, Tammy, for being the person who helps with that. All right, I only have 2 more points. Do you need to give me 5? Do you need to give me 5 yet? Am I okay? Okay. I say, oh, this won't take very long, and then I start talking. Someone could argue with me about this, and that's okay, and they'd be right. But I don't think you can have a full and wholly meaningful life if you're not a reader. Now, my grandparents were not big readers, and they were wonderful humans, and they didn't have a lot of education, and they're lovely. But if I want to be able to have access to resources, I want to be civically engaged, I want to be a good parent or grandparent, I want to have a job or business, I need to read. I need to be able to read. So this is such important work that we're trying to do, and really set students up so that middle school is easier for them, high school is easier, they pursue training or college, then they stay in Tulsa, some of them, and they become incredible employees, they own businesses, they run for office. When we continue to have this crisis around literacy, it impacts the whole community. And it's looking into the future and saying we have to work together in whatever way we have the capacity to set students up when they're precious, full of potential, amazing little people, to be our future leaders, our future business owners, our future ministers, and everything else that they can do. So reading to me, and I'm biased because I was an English major, but reading to me is just one of the most fundamental things. And we at Reading Partners talk about it as a civil right. Like, that's something that schools need to provide students to be able to learn to read. Is so important that we need to all invest in making sure that it happens. So the need is great, and the effort is big, but if we all invest in it, and we add more volunteers, more donors, more advocates for our work, even if just in your circle you can talk about the literacy crisis and how we can all help it, it will get better. But we have to know what we're talking about and how bad it is before, and it's not the kid's fault that it's bad. It's everyone else's fault that it's bad, but we can do something about it. If we post on social media, if we invite people to learn more about any kind of literacy intervention, if we tutor, if we donate, if we ask a young person who's taking a gap year if they might be interested in AmeriCorps service, that's another way that people can engage. The AmeriCorps, if you're not familiar, it's just Peace Corps for the United States. So every center that we have has a federally funded AmeriCorps member leading in that center, and they get training, and they get help with resumes and interview skills so that we can help support them as they're making their move to whatever they're going to do after their AmeriCorps service. But you might have a grandchild or a niece or a friend who, like, they would be great at that. They're not quite sure if they want to go into education yet, but this might be a good school year for them to see if they like it. We often have AmeriCorps members hired away from us in the school. And we're like, man, But the goal is to have people care about education and invest in education. So if they steal our AmeriCorps, we'll go out and recruit more. But the school really is a wonderful place for them to get a feel for being a teacher or being a TA. And then we have ways to help them become credentialed. There are scholarships associated with AmeriCorps service. So if somebody wanted to pursue further education, they have a scholarship. So that's another way that you can spread the word and get people engaged in helping. And I think I said all these things. Okay, then this is my last point. I've touched on these things, but there are all kinds of calls to action. So in the back on the chairs, everyone is welcome to take anything that you like. The first page is information about opportunities to help, and you could volunteer to be a tutor. You could also volunteer as a class to do what we call tutor for a day. And on Fridays, twice a month, we send groups of people into schools to help make up sessions for students who were absent, because we typically just tutor Monday through Thursday. But if you missed your session, we have make-up sessions on Friday. Some organizations, businesses do a tutor for a day quarterly. They just commit to that and they go to that school and they help catch the kids up who missed. And we give you donuts and all kinds of fun things there. So there's that. So there's information about volunteering. The next chair has a document from this year of all the places we served. So you can kind of see, oh, I live near that school, or I wonder if they're going to add a different school. We're adding 1 in Union and we're adding 2 in TPS that are not on that list. And then next to that, there's a sign-up sheet if you're interested in learning more about tutoring, and there's one if you want to volunteer someone for AmeriCorps service. If you have someone who might be interested in your family, you're not committing to anything if you write anything down there. You're just saying, I'd like to learn more about this. So there are 2 sign-up sheets, and then next to that is all the swag. It's pins, stickers, bookmarks, our 10-year anniversary bags. All of those are for you to take. Anything you want to take. And just carrying a pen around that has Reading Partners on it and leaving it somewhere helps people say, what is Reading Partners? Like there's no end to the ways that we can share about Reading Partners. My goal not only is to run us all out of a job, but to make everyone so sick of hearing about Reading Partners that they're like, okay, I'll help. So you often have we've probably seen our commercials on the news in the morning. We've had billboards this year. We had signage in bathrooms. We had signage at Woodland Hills on the kiosks. Like, we are just trying to make sure everyone knows how to help and that we need the help. So you've probably seen us everywhere. If you haven't, just pay attention. You'll see something about Reading Partners. But I just want you to know that I work with an incredible group of 16 people on staff who are former teachers, former principals, people who came to Reading Partners straight out of college, who all they care about all day long is, did we help a student to grow as a reader today? And they have checklists and boards, and they're checking on individual students. So we have seasoned professional educators on our team. That's not true of every region, but it's Tulsa, so it's better. But our team is so invested and cares so deeply about this work and has so much experience in education in Oklahoma that is why we're able to make the impact we are, because they're caring so much, but then we also need our volunteers and our donors. Also, we have our 10-year cocktail party that we're celebrating on June. So if that's compelling, cocktails. June 6th, which is coming up, we are having our 10-year party at Vista 21, which is on Greenwood, and tickets are available online. We are going to honor 2 incredible Tulsans who've helped Reading Partners be all that it is. Michael DuPont, who works for the Schusterman Family Foundation and has been a 10-year tutor, and Amari Jimerson, who was our board chair way longer than you're supposed to be board chair, but she's done everything in the nonprofit world, and she's the executive director of the Birth Equity effort in Tulsa. So we're going to honor both of them for all their decade of service to Reading Partners, and we're going to eat and drink, and it's going to be an Alice in Wonderland theme. So we're going to eat in reverse. We're going to start with dessert. Everything's going to be upside down. Start with dessert, and we're going to have little cocktails that say "drink me" and eat. Everything's good. So it's going to be really fun. We have stilt walkers. Like, it's going to be quite an event. So I invite all of you to think about attending that party. It's going to be great fun, and there'll be a variety of wonderful people there. Okay, I've given you a lot. Do you have any questions or thoughts? Oh, Mike, you're first. Go ahead.
Hold on just a second.
Okay. Okay. You only can ask me things. We didn't stage this.
This is a straight question. Is
Okay.
there an upper age limit?
For serving, are you asking that for yourself?
Yes.
Okay. You have to be 14 years old to start, and there is no upper age.
You're sure?
I'm sure.
Thank you.
It's just reading the script. As long as you can read the script and give some love to a little kid, you're good to go. Okay. Okay.
You touched on this, but I still need a little more help.
Okay.
I read that Dr. Johnson told the State Board of Education, Superintendent Walters, that 100% of the teachers, TPS teachers, had been trained in the science-based reading. Could you give me an elevator speech on
Yes.
exactly what that is?
It's really sounds so much more complicated than it is. Science of reading is how you learn to read. It's the, what does a letter sound like? What is a long A? What is a short A? Let's read all the words that have a long A in them. How do I put letters together like CH? What does that sound like? And then when I know what CH sounds like, I can sound out check. And I can test that and say, that's not quite right. If I read it, and then your teacher would say, try this. That's all it is. It's not sounding out anymore. It's called decoding is the language, but it's the same thing. It's how you and I learn to read. It just sounds really fancy. It's just not about guessing or looking at pictures or, it was just a lot more touchy-feely approach for a while, and we know this works. People need explicit instruction in reading. Your brain doesn't naturally know what CH sound like. So that's all it is.
Olivia, good morning.
Good morning.
I was blessed from kindergarten, first and second grade in Kansas City, Missouri, to learn a word that you have not mentioned, and that's phonics.
Yes.
And that was my gateway, all right, to reading.
Yes.
Then our family got transferred to Oklahoma, all right, and in third grade I walk in an Owen school and it was like a desert. I mean, you know, there was no understanding of reading.
Right.
And I was reading at close to a sixth grade level and then being in the third grade.
Yes.
And realizing, you know, how important that was. And I was always wanting to know, and maybe you can answer it, why has the state of Oklahoma never, you know, put their arms around phonics?
So they've never, you're right that they've never wrapped around that explicitly, but to give a more complex answer, phonics is part of the science of reading. So we are teaching phonics. We teach phonics in our curriculum, and the teachers are trained in that now too. Asking me why the state of Oklahoma hasn't done something for education is a good grief conversation, okay? We don't value public ed like we should. We don't fund it. We don't even, I mean, even our tax arguments that are going on at the legislature right now are about saying, we have enough in the rainy day fund, why do we keep cutting taxes? And but that's Oklahoma. Like, we don't want to pay, we don't like taxes, and we don't have a lot of faith in teachers and public ed. That's wrong, but that's the culture. And like, I was at the legislative, again, you made me get political. I was at the legislative breakfast briefing that the chamber does 3 times a year, and they had several senators and on the stage, and they said, what are you most proud of that you passed this year? And I'm ready. One person said we passed a law that made it okay not to ask an old person for an ID to get a drink. Because it offended some person when they got carded, and we made legislation around that. So that was one thing we were proud of. And we were
always
also
just asking for a tip, a better tip.
And then we were also very proud of private school vouchers. And so, and I'm a private school parent, and that is not right. That money needs to go to the students and for the resources they need. My child does not need that. So that's a very short, but that's unfortunately why we need to vote and get engaged around this work. Tammy.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And all the volunteers I see going in and out of McClure are very appreciated. when I inquired about why we didn't have Reading Partners at McClure
Yes.
until this year
Yes.
again, I was told it was the funding, and apparently the principal has to put that
Yes.
$21,000
Yep.
in the budget. What is being done to help the principals receive that $21,000 so that they can implement Reading Partners in their building? That's one question. The second question is a walk to read with a mirror. Is that helping the kids?
It's not as I'll answer that one first because it's easier. It's not as targeted and rigorous is too strong as our curriculum, but anytime we're taking time to read and getting kids engaged in reading, that's going to help. But that is not as data effective as we're a tier 2 intervention. That's big language for like really serving that particular need. So I appreciate the effort to invest in more reading. We are a better option for that amount of time. But back to your original point is, if it's $21,000 and I'm a principal and I don't have that in my budget, what do I do? So I've only been in this role for a year and a half. So a lot of this, I'm like, oh, we used to do it this way, or this is how it worked. Last year, almost no one in TPS could afford us. So we said, we're not leaving you, we'll fundraise around you. So we just raised the money. That's not sustainable forever, especially if we grow. Every school we add is more fundraising that is on us. I have a good relationship with Dr. Johnson, and so she and I are working together to try to figure out ways to pull money from different places in the TPS budget that don't just live with the principal, because they're trying to pay for teachers and they need their own literacy interventionists and they need a janitor and they're just carrying so much that we're really trying to, over the next maybe 3 years, come up with a district plan, because the district at the board meeting approves $400,000 for Reading Partners and doesn't figure out how to pay for it. They'd say, oh, that's on the principal. So we need a better system for that. Now, since we're talking about calls to action, I have a friend who works on a family foundation who was just like, we'll sponsor a school next year. Like, we'll give you $21,000. You tell us where that needs to go. We're going to sponsor that school. So that's another way that we're trying to think about maybe taking that out of the principal's burden and just saying, that's a lot of fundraising and that's a lot of people giving, but if a Sunday school class or a person or Quick Trip or whomever just said, we will adopt McClure and Marshall and we'll just pay their fees, that's something that we're trying to work around, because they just don't have enough money. And I worked in Charterland, and so I knew, like, oh, that legislation passed, so they're going to get more money in February, like it'll hit the bank. No one ever saw it. So I was saying, we'll get that back in February because that's when it'll be allocated and that's when it went to other places. So again, voting, being very engaged, and just thinking about different ways that we can support schools, because we're working with the district to try to make that a more district-wide thing, but that's not something we can do overnight, and we need ways to work around that, because like John Hope Franklin, they're going to turn over 100% of their teachers next year. There won't be one familiar teacher in that building. So we always say about John Hope Franklin, I don't care if we have to sell a kidney, we're going to be at John Hope Franklin. You don't have to pay us. Like, you need us. You need our people. You need love from adults in the building just to say, hi, I know your name, because they can't keep teachers there. So anything that we can strategize to do, we are willing to do. We want to have a more sustainable strategy going forward. So it's not a heartbreak every time, because I just said, well, we're not dumping you, we're going to fundraise. And in the past, people just said, oh, you can't afford it? I'm sorry. And we went somewhere else, and we're just not doing that anymore. So we're glad that we're back at McClure.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Two things, I guess. First, does your material in the back tell us how we can contribute to your program?
Yes.
Okay.
And coming to the party raises money, number one, but you can always go to the readingpartnerstulsa.org website and just donate directly on the website if that's something you want to do. We do actually do 3 fundraising things each year. So our summer party, which we're doing, and then we do a Books, Brews, and Barbecue event in November at the Canes. And it's a trivia night, so that's super fun. And that raises money. And then our big event that really raises money directly for students is our Booked Up for Summer campaign. And we need about $60,000 a year to do that. But every single student in Reading Partners and graduating from CAP Tulsa into a kindergarten class gets an entire Reading Partners backpack full of new books to take into the summer. And they get Oilers tickets and Drillers tickets and FC Tulsa tickets and stuff from the library summer reading program. Like, we just set them up for fun and literacy in the summer. But books are expensive. Good books are very expensive, and we have a lot of access to discounts through Scholastic and different places, but that's another place that, like, when people donate, it's often for books that we're raising. And then Magic City and Fulton Street, 2 downtown independent bookstores, they work with us year-round. So if you wanted to go in and say, I want to donate a book, I want to buy 2 books and give them to Reading Partners, they always have a bin ready to go. Okay, that was your first question.
Oh, let me think a minute. First question was, I'd very much like to get involved in your program.
Great.
And as an ex-teacher, but now I find that I can't commit day after day after
Right.
day for the weeks. And how important is the fact that I may be there for 4 weeks in a row and then suddenly gone for 2 weeks?
That's very
Is my
common.
relationship with the person that I'm tutoring?
That's very common because so many of our volunteers are retired. So they go to visit their grandkids, or they have trips planned and things like that. So as long as we kind of know that about your schedule up front, the AmeriCorps member in the center, who is their other person they know really well, can be in that session with them. They can do the makeup session. Or if you two were tutoring the same student, we could reach out to you and say, could you come twice this week? And then you've got that relational commitment still. But we also have people who, I have friends that work at Morgan Stanley, and none of them can ever be like every Thursday. So they tag team. 2 of them sign up with 1 child, and when one's in town, they just go when they're in town. And so they still have their 2 people, but it doesn't have to be every single Thursday at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So we work around that a lot.
And if you'll allow me one more question.
Absolutely.
Are the books that you're using with these children vetted before they read them? And this weekend I was involved in a lengthy discussion about, you can't believe the books they're letting our kids read in the 3rd grade. And I thought, that's crazy. But
So our books now are, everything that's in the curriculum is created in-house at Reading Partners. So we're not just pulling, now your read aloud book when you come into the center and they pick a book, that could be Where the Wild Things Are or Pete the Cat or whatever. But the books that are in the packets, we wrote and illustrated. So we have complete control over that curriculum. Now, you ask a good question, and I'll be upfront about it. Because we're part of a national organization that is very, very invested in equity, we are all invested in equity too, but sometimes our new books, in the spirit of representing everyone, like different people from other countries and things like that, they'll create names for the characters that we can't read and the kids can't read. So we're like, that's not anyone's real name that any of these children might actually know. And they'll say that, like, I don't know anybody with that name. And so we're kind of in this intermediate stage of saying, like, okay, we tried to make them super inclusive, which I love, but we made them so inclusive that we can't all read the names. So we're in the second iteration of, like, fixing some of those things with student feedback, because students will just say, I'm going to call them this instead, which is fine. But it is all curated in-house. Like, we're not ever like pulling anything just off and saying, read this. Everything has been, and I am on the review committee, so I don't always have time to do that, but like they will send us new books that they're producing for feedback and things like that. So
thank you.
Hey, Bill, Mark has a question. Okay, all right.
I'm taking up your whole Sunday school class.
That's okay.
Okay.
Hi. For about 25 years, one of my hobbies is finding kid-appropriate comic books, and I've donated to the Tulsa Boys Home. But have you ever considered something like that for helping kids for literacy?
Yes, so that's exactly what my dad says. Like, if you find something you like, turn that into something to read. Comic books do that. Like, comic books engage a child that might not be engaged in another book. So I'm going to go away from Reading Partners a little bit when I answer this question. My program director and I are working closely with BMX, because they have that incredible center in North Tulsa, and they have a national program that's called Read to Ride And it's basically, it's very thin, that's why they called us. You read a bunch of books, you get your stickers or your tick marks, and then you get a bike if you read a certain amount of pages or books. They're like, that's not really what we want to do. We want to have a more robust curriculum. We want to have more investment. They have kids, little kids, who are waiting with parents while the older kids are riding their bikes. Like, we have all these opportunities to get books in front of students. So that is the plan that Courtney and I have for working with BMX, is writing BMX comic books for them. And then they could sell those to other BMX centers around the country or to classrooms. So you may need to be a consultant with us.
Well, it's harder to find kid-appropriate comics because they're
Right.
darker and grittier now.
Yes, but we have access to BMX Olympians, so we could tell their stories and how they started riding, and we could make them all about, like, the story went to the Gathering Place or it went to Philbrook. Like, you could make them very Tulsa specific, make them very connected to bike riding. There are Olympians training there that they could go and meet and read their stories. So we have a lot of hope for that project going forward, but you and I need to connect about that.
Can I say a second one right quick? I was a teacher for many years, and one thing I noticed my later years of my teaching is the textbook representatives now have everything is changed over into computer-based things, and the kids don't have books to hold in their hands for textbooks anymore. And so is this a problem with you? Is everything now online with a computer screen rather than a book holding in their hands?
You're asking a very Tulsa-specific question. So we have 2 delivery methods at Reading Partners. We can do everything sitting there in the Reading Center with paper and books. Or we have an incredible version of that curriculum online that Amazon built for us. It is amazing. And in some ways, it's a little easier for the tutor, because instead of managing your materials, you're just clicking to the next. It's driving you to the next piece, but it's the same books, it's the same lessons. But we have so many people and funders in Tulsa who do not want kids on a screen. And we can't get people to volunteer to do it either. People want to volunteer and sit there and know that child and read with them. So we have both versions that are both effective and both vetted. And in Tulsa, nobody cares about the online version. They care about being with the child in the space with the books.
I just want to say you're incredible.
Oh, that's
and
kind of you.
What a blessing you and your organization are. God
Thank
love you.
you. You paid her to say that, didn't you? Thank you.
Well, you
Leah,
can keep talking.
well, Leah, my mother-in-law has a question back there. Before I worked there, but not since, by the way, just so everybody knows.
Well, I know. I'm coming back.
Okay.
I'm signing out as soon as this is over. But the children were just like so thrilled to see a person, want to be with them one-on-one. Are you coming back? That was the first thing that she asked me every year as a little Hispanic girl. Are you coming back? Are you coming back? When are you going to be back? And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, darn, because I didn't come back.
No.
I wonder what happened to that poor little girl.
Right. Well, and that's true for almost every tutor ever. Like Rosemary Harris, I don't know if you all know Rosemary, she's on our board and she's amazing. She has tutored for 9 years, and she has a picture of every student she's ever tutored on her refrigerator, and she's always checking on those. She'll call me and say, do you know what happened to so-and-so? Like, where did they go to middle school? And so exactly what you said. Like, my dad, he's not going to be too, like, emotional or effusive, but he's like, how's William doing? Is William going to make his growth goals? Because he got suspended for that fight, but he shouldn't have been suspended because there weren't any teachers in the building. Like, so Dad said he should have been suspended. He should have been with me in Reading Partners. Like, you get so attached to your person, that your little person who does, like, you're here, you came back, and we are, for a variety of very good reasons. Like, we background check every tutor. We say, don't hug the kid, don't hug the kids, don't stroke their, like, all the things. And Mom's like, they hug me, I can't. And so you don't want to say, get off of me, kid. So the hugging just happens, and we just hope no one sees it. But, like, they run up and hug you because you came back, and you love them, and you invest in them.
Question in terms of your funding.
Yes.
Do you live entirely on support from local donations, foundations, and so forth? Are you federally funded, state funded, so forth?
Thank you for asking that question. So we have about a $4 million annual budget, and about 1.3 of that is federal because it pays the AmeriCorps members. So we don't have to pay for that service piece. That comes straight from the government. And we have, next year we'll have 50 AmeriCorps members. So, and that covers their scholarships that they earn. It covers, they don't make any money. They make like $24,000 a year because it's service. But we feed them all the time. We give them bus passes, things like that. So that's that money. Then if we had the fee for service from every school, it would be $21,000 per school. In my short time, we've of course not reached that, so we've had to rely on donations. We do not currently get any funding from the national organization. They depend more on us to do all of that work. I had a mean conversation about that this week, though. They need to get to work on that. But everything else is individuals, lots of grants. Like GKFF has always supported us, Schusterman, Zero, Quick Trip, Be Okay. Like we have all those funders. 2 minutes. And but we have a lot of individual donors too, who just do $35 a month, or they fund part of a school, or they give to Booked Up for summer. But it is mostly local fundraising, especially with where the schools are right now, that we can't rely on that. And I have to say, I'm grateful even for the conditions that we operate in Oklahoma. My friend who runs the Dallas-Fort Worth region, her fee for service was $43,000 a school, and so they built a lot of their budget on that. They counted on that, and Fort Worth dumped them this year. So they lost all those schools in Fort Worth. They just said, we don't have the money, with no rollout. So she's just in Dallas now, and they don't have Tulsa philanthropy and generosity either, but they're having to completely rethink everything and fire people and things that we don't have to do because we have such a generous base of donors, which we need to cultivate more and more, but that's where we mostly get our money.
Olivia, thank you for
thank you.
coming today and telling. Great program, very worthwhile program. And if somebody wants to get involved, they just contact you. Okay, thanks a lot. Have a good holiday, guys. See you next week.